In this lesson, we are going to practice rounding to the nearest 10. So, when we're looking at rounding numbers to the nearest 10, we want to know which decade a number is closest to. So if I'm looking at the number 46, I want to know, is that closest to 40 or is that closest to 50? So when I'm looking at this, and this is a mat that I got off of SIS for Teachers, we are looking at the number line here, and we found 46. So we know 40 is that starting decade number, okay? And then, so here's 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. So we know 46 is right here. And then if I'm going to the next decade, I would be at 50, right? So the rule is when you're looking at rounding any number, since we're rounding to the nearest 10, we are going to look at that ones place. And with the ones place, that will tell us what we do with our tens place. So the midpoint here would be 45. And when you're rounding numbers, you do 5 or more, raise the score, four or less, let it rest. So here we're definitely in our ones place above the 5. We're at the 6. So what are we going to do? Are we going to let it rest? And are we closer to 40 or are we closer to 50? So our number is 46 and we are closer to 50. So then we are rounding, when we round to the nearest 10, 50 is what we're rounding to. So then looking here, let's look at the number 32. Okay, so let's look at what is the decade that we're at, which is 30s. What is our next decade, which is 40s. So I'm going to look at this too, and it's going to tell me which decade I'm going closest to. So if I'm looking at that 2, 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. So what am I closer to? Am I closer to 30 or am I closer to 40 at 32? If you said 30, you are correct. So we are rounding to 30. Let's do 67. What decade am I in? I'm in the 60s. What's my next decade? 70s. I'm going to look at the ones place, which has a 7, and that helps me tell which decade I will be closest to. So if I'm at a 7, the decade that I'm closer to, is it 60 or 70? Which way am I going to round? I'm going to round up to 70 because 7 is 5 or more. And 67, if on the number line, would be closer to 70 rather than 60. Let's do another one. Let's do 44. What decade am I in, everybody? If you said 40s, you are correct. I am in my 40s. And then the next decade would be the 50s. What number do I have in my ones place? So does that 4 tell me I'm closer to 40 or 50? If you said 40, you are correct. Okay, let's do one more together, then I'm going to have you practice a couple. So let's do 78. What decade am I in? If you said 70, you are correct. What is the next decade? That would be 80. I look at my ones place, and my ones has an 8 in it, and that helps me decide what I'm going to do. So if I'm at 78, would I say, am I closer to 70 or am I closer to 80? If you said 80, you are correct. Okay, I want you to try a couple. Let's have you do 29, and let's have you do 82. Okay, so pause this video right now, practice those two, and then when we come back, we'll check them. Okay, so if you practice these, you're looking at the ones place here, which is a 9. Oh, sorry, what decade are we in? We are in the 20s. What decade is next? 30. Okay, so we have a 9 in our ones place. We use that 9 to look at our tens. Am I closer to 20 or am I closer to 30? If you had 30, then you are correct. Okay, so we're going to look at our 2 and 82, our ones place. What decade am I in? If you said 80, you are correct. What decade is next? 90. Okay, so looking at that 2, does that tell me that I am closer to 80 or 90? If you said 80, you are correct. So that's how we round to the nearest 10. Of course, you can use a mat, but you're not always going to have a mat. So you can always ask yourself, which decade am I closer to, looking at the ones place.